faces makes me feel a lot better. So as Sean said, my name is Rick Spillers. Sometimes I help out with worship here when he's unavailable. But I lead worship every Sunday morning for Ernesto over at Flint City Church at Carriagetown. I've been leading worship there for about 3 years since the church launched. I have a son and a daughter, a 1-year-old son named Malachi, a 2-year-old daughter named Rama, and my wife named Megan. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here because my son has chicken pox, which is the worst. We got a hold of this, of Ernesto about 3 years ago. He got a hold of us, actually, and he reached out and asked if I wanted to help him out with worship for this new church he was starting in Flint. And we joined him for an evening, came over to see what it was all about, and felt like the Lord was leading us here to Flint. So we were living in Sterling Heights, which is just north of Detroit. For the first 2 years, we were commuting back and forth to Flint every Sunday morning, and then sometimes during the week to be a part of the community here. And we felt like it just wasn't enough, that we wanted to be a part of his vision further and what the Lord was doing here. So we actually bought a house here in Grand Blanc about a year ago. We moved our family closer so that we could invest more fully in the work that's going on here. So I'm really happy to say that don't worry, I don't say I'm from Flint because that's not allowed. I live in Grand Blanc. So, but I'm happy to be a part of what's going on in Flint.
Amen.
And I'm just happy to be here with you guys too. So for you guys that do know, and for you that don't, I gave my testimony here a few months ago, and I spoke about what addiction has done to my family and my life. For you that don't know, my father was a severe alcoholic. He passed away in 2014 from liver failure and kidney failure, and basically had one of the most horrific deaths you can imagine. My extended family, my uncles on both sides of my family are all addicts of some sort, alcoholics, gamblers, thieves, abusers, just people that really you hate to have to grow up around, essentially. And my mom, she was a part of that lifestyle as well. So my mom was a single mother with 3 kids. We were living in Pontiac. She was in that lifestyle. She sold cocaine. We had a lot of different men in and out of our house all the time. We were living in people's basements wherever we could, afford to keep the lights on at, because a lot of times our lights would go off. So it was a really rough childhood in that sense, and it was pretty hopeless. In 1995, my mom ended up getting saved, believing in Jesus Christ, and as you can tell, the rest is history. I ended up here, so by the grace of God, things worked out pretty well for our family, so I'm really thankful for that. But I'll glory to God for that, because it wasn't us. But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about tonight. I was reading in my Bible the other day, and I came across a certain passage that I want to share with you. It's in the book of Mark, and it's chapter 5, verses 1 through 20. So I'm going to read that story for you. It's up on the screen, but it's a different version than I have, so just bear with me. Okay, cool. So it says, they went across the lake to the region of the Gerasenes. When Jesus got out of the boat, a man with an evil spirit came from the tombs to meet him. This man lived in the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with a chain. For he had often been chained hand and foot, but he tore the chains apart and broke the irons on his feet. No one was strong enough to subdue him. Night and day, among the tombs and in the hills, he would cry out and cut himself with stones. When he saw Jesus from a distance, he ran and fell on his knees in front of him. He shouted at the top of his voice, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Swear to God you won't torture me." For Jesus had said to him, "Come out of this man, you evil spirit." Then Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" "My name is Legion," he replied, "for we are many." And he begged Jesus again and again not to send them out of the area. A large herd of pigs was feeding on the nearby hillside. The demons begged Jesus, "Send us among the pigs, allow us to go into them." He gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out and went into the pigs. The herd, about 2,000 in number, rushed down the steep bank into the lake and were drowned. Those tending the pigs ran off and reported this in the town and countryside, and the people went out to see what had happened. When they came to Jesus, they saw the man who had been possessed by the legion of demons sitting there, dressed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. Those who had seen it told the people what had happened to the demon-possessed man, and told about the pigs as well. Then the people began to plead with Jesus to leave their region. As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus didn't let him, but said, "Go home to your family, tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you." So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. So the name of this sermon is called Life Beyond the Demons. Life Beyond the Demons, what happened after this man was healed. So first off, the thing that struck me in this passage was that there's an issue with value, and I think you guys could recognize that. This is huge news, okay? So all these people just saw a completely insane man get healed from demons, and then they saw 2,000 pigs run off a cliff and die. That's like, I mean, even in today's standards, that would be like world newsworthy, right? So all the people that saw it, which was just a handful, they ran immediately to the villages, they ran to the cities, and they said, "Dudes, you gotta check this out. That crazy dude that lived down in the cemetery and always was naked and never brushed his hair and fought everybody, he's healed. All these pigs are dead. Come check this out." So they went to the cities, they went to the villages, and they brought all of the people down to see what Jesus had done. Now you would think immediately that all of the villagers would say, "Holy smokes, this guy, he's the real deal. He healed that psychopath that we've all been afraid of for our entire lives." But in reality, that wasn't the case. So they saw that their friend, or not, I guess he wasn't their friend, that their neighbor had been healed and delivered from hundreds of demons and was a new person. The response to that was they were afraid, and they asked Jesus to leave. The healer who did the miracle, they asked him to leave. Now, what we see here is that we have a group of people in a society that heavily valued their status quo. They liked their comfort, their traditions, their livelihood. Obviously, they liked making money through their pigs. And they liked their moral standards, okay? They didn't want to have to love this dude. And when Jesus came in and said, "Listen, folks, the worst, find him, love him, take care of him, heal him, be a part of that journey with him," their immediate response was to say, "Get out of town, dude. We ain't having none of that." So that was a pretty interesting concept, because it really challenged their moral standing in that community at the time. Now, we see that Christ obviously valued this guy a little differently, right? This is my first point. Christ values him who the world views as worthless. Amen. Christ values him who the world views as worthless. How many of you guys have ever felt worthless to the world? Because of your addiction, or because of you have a family member who's addicted? Yeah, I've been there too. And I know what that feels like. And a lot of times, the world around us says that we are worthless and we're not worth anything. But Jesus, as we see, saw the worst case of worthlessness in history. Thousands of demons, enough to fill up 2,000 pigs, were possessing this crazy dude. And we see two proofs that he cared about and valued this guy. The first is the fact that he even bothered to talk to him in the first place. So if I'm walking down the street in downtown Chicago or downtown Detroit and I see a homeless guy who's strung out laying on the street, naked or whatever, my first instinct is, "Ooh, I'm just going to keep walking." But Jesus didn't do that. He saw value in the man, and he stopped and he asked him his name. And he said, "Who are you? What's your name?" Obviously, he sees worth in him because he wants to know who he is. Secondly, he healed him. Okay, so he took the time to use a little bit of his holy power to heal this guy and give him new life. So obviously, he values him in that way. But secondly, the proof is a little more subtle. This miracle took place in a land called the Decapolis. So you have to kind of recognize that the Decapolis was, it was a region of 10 Roman cities in the era. It was the eastern flank of the expansion of the Roman Empire, so the world was expanding, and this was kind of like the hub of Roman culture, right? Up until this time, Jesus hadn't crossed from Israel into Gentile territory. He had been completely ministering to the Jews the entire time. So that means that this group of people that Jesus was talking to was most likely Gentiles, and this man that he healed was most likely a Gentile. I mean, we're Gentiles, if that kind of, nobody caught that. We're not Jews. Jesus was making a statement in this point, okay? He had said, by going across the lake into Gentile territory, he said, "Hey, Pharisees, I'm not just for you. My ministry is not just for the Jews. I'm here to love all people. I'm here to love the Gentiles as well." And he was kind of slapping them in the face politically and culturally at the time, which was a big statement on his behalf. See, the Jews didn't view the Gentiles as equal. They kind of viewed them as subpar. They thought that, hey, we're the chosen ones. We have a monopoly on talking to God. But Jesus saw it differently. So this man was not even valued by the Jewish community, who apparently were the closest to God. He wasn't valued by his own community, the Gentiles. They didn't want anything to do with him. They asked Jesus to leave when he got healed. So he was pretty worthless. But what's awesome is we know that Jesus saw value in him. Just like he sees value in the addict, in the abuser, the sinner, the person who's in recovery. We know that Jesus died for us. We've heard that a lot of times. But what's incredible is that we have experienced Jesus' healing power and his love in our hearts. We know that it's a real personal thing. Okay? So what's next for this guy after he gets healed? Obviously, he's shown I have value. Oh, he asks Jesus in verses 18 and 19 to go with him. He says, as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, go home to your family and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he's had mercy on you. Please go away. Right? That's kind of what it seems like. But the guy wanted to follow Jesus and sit at his feet, and he wanted to learn from him. But Jesus had other plans. He gave him a specific charge with tremendous foresight, which kind of blew my mind when I finally realized it after reading this passage 1,000 times. I kind of finally caught it. Jesus gave this guy a task that seems like busy work, and he sent him on his way, but in reality, he gave him an incredibly weighted and incredibly valuable task. He told him to go tell a story. He said, go and tell what the Lord has done for you. Go and tell about the mercy that I've had on you. He knew the importance of this man's story. Okay? He knew the importance of the power in that man's redemption experience. Which brings me to my second point, which hammer this into your heads, okay? No pun intended. Your story is your hammer. All right? Your story is your hammer. That's going to be what powers through those brick walls to reach the people around you for the kingdom of God. Okay, Jesus knew that his power was in his story. Your story is your most powerful tool. The reason he knew that for that man, and the reason it's true for you guys, is because your story is uniquely yours. You're the only person that's ever lived it. Nobody has experienced Christ in the way that you have, because nobody's experienced the healing that you've experienced through his love.
That's right.
It's easy to communicate because, again, you lived it. You can communicate your story passionately. I'm going to tell you the truth here. When Ernesto asked me if I would be interested in preaching, I immediately freaked out because I thought, great, I don't know much about the Bible. I'm kind of low on the totem pole. I'm not like him. He's like a scholar, you know? So trying to convey what Christ has to say in his teachings is really scary to me because I don't know, I'm not a super smart scholarly dude. But what I can do is I can share the story that the Lord gave me because it's mine and nobody else knows it. I can tell you guys what the Lord has done in my heart and the healing that he's given to me because it's mine to tell. Jesus knew that this was going to be an integral part of this demon-possessed man's evangelism, and we see that he wants us to use that through Paul. Paul was the greatest missionary of all time, right?
That's right.
There you go. Paul traveled all around the world and told a lot of people about Christ. And he used his story to further the gospel of Jesus Christ. We see that in Galatians. And I'll just flip real quick to Galatians chapter 1, verse 13. It says, for you have heard of my previous way of life in Judaism, how intensely I persecuted the church of God and tried to destroy it. Paul murdered Christians. He killed people. And he got joy out of it. He was a sick dude. Okay? And you'd think that as a man who is now preaching the love of Christ, he would shy away from that and, hey guys, as I'm teaching you Christians, please forget about my past, right? Not the case at all. Paul shows us that you don't need to be shy about what you've gone through. You don't need to hide what you've gone through, the experiences you've had, and the redemptive qualities that Christ has brought forward in your life. You don't have to hide that stuff. He wants us to use it. Jesus wants us to use that. Jesus knew the importance of the demon-possessed man's story because he said, tell how much the Lord has done for you, and of the mercy that the Lord has had on you. He could have said, hey, I'm Jesus, dude. Go tell everybody about me. Everybody's already heard anyways. Tell them what I've done. Tell them what God's done. But he didn't. Instead, he said, go tell them what the Lord has done for you. He knew that it was a personal experience that needed to be shared, not just information, right? God wanted it to be personal. So we know that God values us, and we know that he thinks our personal story is important for furthering his kingdom. So where do we go from here? How do we do it? Well, our influence spreads when we start small. Our influence will spread when we start small. So I'm going to read 19 again, and it says, Jesus did not let him get into the boat, but said, go home to your family, tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he's had mercy on you. Again, it's a very simple instruction, but it's weighted. In this way, it wasn't weighted about, hey, go tell your story. I think this is kind of a more personal thing for a lot of you guys here and myself too. The purpose comes in that word family. Go and tell your family what has happened to you. Okay, so don't raise your hands, okay? But how many of you folks here have either said these phrases or heard these phrases from a family member? I promise it's the last time. I swear it's not going to happen again. I'm different, I'm changed. I promise I'm clean. I promise it's done. I've heard that lots of times in my life, and it's incredibly heartbreaking to hear because the majority of the times when I heard it, that wasn't the truth. But in the same token, I've said that quite a few times to people that really loved me and cared about me, and I broke their hearts because I didn't follow through on that as well. I think Jesus knew this when he sent this guy on the way. Go talk to your family. Okay, so imagine this. You have a family member who's completely nuts and has been possessed by demons your entire life. Who knows? This guy could have had kids, right? He could have had a son or a daughter. He could have had aunts or uncles or moms and dads or brothers and sisters that loved him. We don't know. But imagine you've got this family member who's completely off his rocker, and in a moment of clarity, he comes to you and says, hey, I'm clean. It's gone. I'm a normal person. Let's have a relationship now. And then they buy into it, and then a week later, here comes Legion. I'm a psycho again, and, ripping off my clothes and all that kind of stuff that it described. So obviously his family probably couldn't trust him very much. I think Jesus knew this when he sent him there. Go tell your family what's been done. He knew that it needed to go to his family first, because he knew that those were the ones that were probably the most hurt by this man in their entire lives. Right? In his entire sphere of influence, his family was probably the people that experienced the most hurt from his possession. They would need to see proof of his change. They were the ones that were going to need to walk side by side with him day in and day out, every single day, seeing how he's been healed, seeing how he's a different person, seeing what he now is instead of who he used to be, because they're the ones that felt it the worst. I think Christ knew that by doing this, he was going to not only change their view of, their family member, but he was also going to extend his ministry farther than he ever could have done on his own. They're going to see Christ through the healing that took place in their brother who they thought was gone and would never come back. Jesus knew that in this way, they were going to be able to support him and take his ministry further. So, in my mind, I see it like this. If I see a brother or a friend who's battling addiction or recovering from addiction and walks up to me and says, it's over, dude, I beat it, I'm done, I'm going to live for the kingdom, I'm healed, I can say I'm really happy to hear that, and I'm excited, and I want to support you in every way. That's awesome. But if I see the same guy walk up and he has his entire family with him, his pastor, his friends, his church family, everybody that he knows and is most intimate with in his life, and they can say, yep, that's the truth. We see the change. Right. We walk through it with him. We support him and we vouch for his character in this way. Right. How incredibly powerful is that for the kingdom of God, right? Right. Makes sense. Jesus, it's logical, okay? It seems really out there and supernatural with all the demons and everything, but it's a super logical passage in that way. Right. So Christ knew that when he sent this man on the way. So there's power in their support, in and their families. That's why he sent them there. In verse 20, things start to heat up quite a bit. It says, "So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed." Okay, that's pretty cool. Decapolis, 10 cities, big area. Cities, not villages, a lot of people around. So naturally, this guy probably had a pretty large sphere of influence. Imagine it like this. There's one crazy guy that lives in an area that nobody in the village can go around because he always runs out of the caves and tries to fight people, or he's unsafe to be around, he screams at you and stuff like that, so you steer clear. That probably spread outward to the local villages and the local towns until other people nearby knew, hey, don't go over there, they got a crazy guy over in that village, we don't want anything to do with him. I think it's kind of the same way when people are like, it'd be like if people were like, hey, don't drive up 75, don't go through Flint, man. You're going to get jumped if you go up there. That's kind of the same, that spreads outwards, Like, people catch news of that down in Ann Arbor or Detroit or wherever. So this guy's influence was probably a lot larger than we see because he was the town crazy dude. So, yeah, he was. So, verse 20 says that he moved through the Decapolis and started amazing people throughout all the 10 cities there. It's pretty phenomenal, right? Power of Christ, amazing people all over the frontier of the Roman Empire. I think Christ knew that the good news was going to bleed outwards. Christ knew that this guy was going to take it back to his family. He was going to sit in place, tell his mom, tell his dad, tell his cousins, tell his neighbors, tell the guy down the street, hey man, I'm not in that cave anymore. You're welcome to go visit the grave of your great-great-grandpa if you want to. Like, I'm not going to stop you this time. So the family around, the village around, the towns around, word had spread. He had influence, okay? Christ knew that this would happen. And if that was the end of the story, that would be a pretty cool ending, right? The influence spread, word about Jesus took off, people are excited and can now go to the graveyard, and everybody's great. See, the story doesn't stop there. And like I said earlier, Christ had tremendous foresight. So his ministry, like I said, was only in Israel up until this point, the nation of Israel, which was, for anybody who likes geography like I do and is a complete nerd, it's on the west side of the Sea of Galilee. Well, he went across the sea into the Gentile territory for one day, healed this man, and then the next night he went back to Israel, and he didn't come back for, at minimum, 6 months to a year. So he was gone quite a while. But in this time, the demon-possessed man was not complacent. He didn't sit around idle and wait for Jesus to come back and pick him up and, join my caravan. He didn't just sit there and go to work, 9 to 5. If we jump ahead to Mark chapter 7, I won't read it because it's long. Basically, it says that Jesus revisits the Decapolis a time later. And when he comes back, there are 4,000 men eager to listen to his teachings. The same place, there's 4,000 men. That doesn't count women and children, which is probably a lot more. There's 4,000 men eager and waiting to listen to what Jesus has to say. Now, think about this. When he came the first time, nobody cared. The only person that came out was the demon-possessed guy because he pulled his boat up on shore next to the cemetery. So nobody gave a rip who Jesus was at this point. In fact, they asked him to leave. But when he comes back, all of a sudden there's thousands of people wanting to hear what he has to say. Now, it doesn't directly say in the Bible, hey, the demon-possessed man went out and brought all these people in. It doesn't say that. But we can pretty much infer from this passage that that's probably what happened. He amazed people all over the Decapolis with this story. See, Christ instructed him to go where his influence was the largest in the smallest circle he had, and he knew that it would extend outwards from here. He knew that it would bleed, and that's exactly what it did. A lot of people actually say that this man was actually the first missionary to the Gentiles. That's an incredible statement. He was the first one to take Christ to the Gentiles. I think if I look back at where this guy was, a worthless, violent, demon-possessed, invaluable person that probably wasn't worth the effort, to being the first person to take Christ to the Gentiles and seeing thousands and thousands of people get to know or hear Christ because of his actions. That's an incredible ending to that story. That's phenomenal, right? I think Jesus designed it to work this way. See, he wasn't giving us a story, feel-good, another miracle that Jesus did. He was laying out a very specific game plan here. First, know that you have value, recognize the power of your story, and share it with the people around you. And I'm going to work through that, and I'm going to do huge things through you because you're willing to do that.
Amen.
I was given a first-hand look at this in my mom's life. She was the only one in my family that got a hold of Christ. Well, I guess that Christ got a hold of and did some work in her life. Now, when I was 10 years old, she got saved. She moved us out of Pontiac and brought us up into the thumb of Michigan, and she started heavily investing into her kids, pouring into us spiritually, praying for us, teaching us the Bible. And through that, she brought up 3 kids who had a knowledge of Jesus Christ and what he can do and who he is. As we grew, we brought our friends into the fold. She became like the den mother of the neighborhood, just looking out for all the broken kids in our neighborhood and all the teenagers. And as we got older and turned into adults, she's still a mother to all these friends of mine who maybe don't have guidance or don't have a mother that can teach them these things. And finally, as we got older, she began sending teams of young people out on missions trips, even doing missions trips herself. She was taking the gospel physically to other parts of the world. And that's 100% because Jesus Christ got a hold of her life and transformed it. And she wasn't afraid to use her influence where she had the most power, which was right at home. Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's an incredible story, you guys. You have the ability to change everything if you're obedient to using your influence where it's the biggest, which is to the brother, parent, or the friend right next to you.
Amen, brother.
I just want to remind you guys, if you forget this tonight, you have value, okay? Jesus didn't die for a bunch of people that were worthless. He died because he saw value in all of us. No matter how far you've gone or what you've done or who you are or who you've been, there's value there, and Christ recognizes that, and he wants it. And he doesn't want you to be afraid to use your story and what you've been through to further his kingdom, because that's what you're called to do. Further the kingdom of Christ. Share the good news that you've experienced. You've experienced change in your life, and you've experienced peace and goodness that a lot of people in this world don't have. He wants you to use it, and he wants you to not be ashamed to use your hammer in that way, to break down walls with the people around you. And finally, he wants you to stand in place, look to the people that are closest to you, and he wants you to tell them your story. Tell them about what you've been through. Tell them about what he's done for you and the mercy he's had on you, because it's so good. It's worth telling, right? It is. I stepped out of some dark stuff in my own life. And I can honestly say that the best joy that I have in life is being able to share the healing that I've experienced with somebody who's going through some darkness of their own. And be able to see the light come on in their eyes and say, there's hope for me, I didn't know that. That's what's going to do it. Your story is going to be what breaks down those walls. There's so much more to your life beyond the demons that you face right now. There's so much more beyond the addiction, beyond the struggles, beyond all the hurt you've experienced, beyond your healing and your recovery. There's more beyond that. All that stuff is only the beginning of who you are, and it's only the beginning of what Jesus wants to do through you to further his kingdom. If this man who was worthless can change the lives of thousands of people just by talking, I mean, what can we do? We're not worthless. Christ tells us that. He tells us that we have value and that we have influence. We got to use it. Sometimes Sean come out and play, and I know Ernesto likes to do like an altar call or whatever. I don't have anything like formal like that, but I'm happy to pray with you guys. If you want to come forward and kneel at the altar and pray about what the Lord has called you to in this life, please do that. If you want to stand and worship and just revel in the word that the Lord has on your heart, please do that as well. But yeah, I want to pray with you guys right now. If you wouldn't mind standing up with me, we're just going to worship the Lord a little bit together. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much. First and foremost, Lord, that you are a God who values your creation. You see worth in us beyond what we see in ourselves. You see worth in us that the world says isn't there. And you see goodness that a lot of people often overlook. But Jesus, we want to be more than just healed. We want to be more than just fixed or made new. Lord, we want to be people that extend our arms and extend our voices and extend our reach to the ends of the earth and say, Jesus did this for me. Jesus is real. He can bring real joy, real peace, and you can experience it, Lord. We want to take our personal story, we want to take the things that we've struggled with, and we want to hand them out and say, look at Jesus did this, and he can do it for you. God, make us vessels of your Spirit. Make us people who are not ashamed of where we've come from, not ashamed of what we've gone through, but instead, Lord, make us people that are bold and use our past to break down walls, to send forth your good word, Lord, into the world. So Jesus says, we sing, we just want to lift you up. We want to give you praise and honor because you're worth it. Lord, we thank you so much, Jesus, for all that you do. Amen.